We all rely on farmers and ranchers, but farming is riskier than other businesses out there. Crop insurance helps farmers manage their risk. With crop insurance, farmers put skin in the game by paying premiums and shouldering deductibles. That keeps taxpayers from having to pick up the whole bill every time disaster strikes. Today, about 90% of U.S. farmland is insured, providing $100 billion in protection to more than 130 different kinds of crops. It's a testament to the program's success.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Executive Editor, now Phil Brasher, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C. this week, this is kind of a side effect of the government shutdown. My commute is much easier. I don't know if you could say the same for yours, but it's pretty evident.
There
not nearly as many
far
people.
fewer people on the train.
That's not nearly as many people using the train, using the streets to drive themselves to work. It's a much easier
spaces all over the place, especially around USDA.
That, of course, is because the government is shut down. A number of federal employees, thousands in fact, not reporting to work here these last couple of weeks. That situation remains ongoing, really with no foreseeable end in sight, as the White House and Capitol Hill Democrats continued their negotiations and really have shown no progress on that front. But the Trump administration did take a couple of steps this week in order to kind of alleviate some of the effects that the shutdown is having in farm country and in some USDA programs. First one we want to talk to you about being the Trump administration extending the deadline to a period yet to be determined, really, for the market facilitation program. Once the shutdown is ended, there will be that many business days will be added to the previously established January 15th deadline. And Phil, this was something they did really to kind of ease a lot of the concerns in farm country about signing up for those market facilitation program payments.
And obviously the payments are because of the trade wars going on, and so administration started this to try to deal with a political problem that they had, and so they had to do something about this deadline. Not terribly much of a surprise, and we can't tell you when that new deadline is going to be, because as you pointed out, it's being extended by the number of days that the Farm Service Agency is actually closed. They've been closed since December 28th, finishing up the second week. So presumably the deadline will be extended by at least 2 to 3 weeks, depending on when the shutdown ends.
Mm-hmm. And another thing the Trump administration's USDA did this week was something that was drawing a little bit more press outside of just the farm country publications, but that was moving up a deadline that Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program fund recipients will be receiving their February benefits. They're actually going to be receiving those by January 20th. And Phil, you kind of did the reporting on this for us. What was the mechanics that the USDA used in order to move this deadline up to get these folks their benefits a little bit earlier?
Well, it's fairly obscure, but the USDA argues that a provision in the continuing resolution that was funding the department until December the 21st, now expired, actually gave them an additional 30 days to spend money on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And so they say they have by January 20th, they can actually release the February benefits. Now, mechanically speaking, they have to get the states are involved in this. There are state agencies that actually handle it, and there are third-party companies that actually put the money on the EBT cards that the SNAP recipients use. And so all of that has to happen between now and January 20th in order for these benefits to get out. But it was a growing political problem for the administration. All of this is, of course, about keeping maximum negotiating leverage as they duel on the shutdown. This sort of took this out of play, at least for a while. Of course, we're getting into March, and they don't have the money to cover the March benefits. But this issue, for now, is off the table.
Yeah, and it's important to reiterate what Phil just mentioned there at the end of that response. February is taken care of. March remains a question mark for SNAP recipients. And so how long the shutdown drags out, will March remain an issue? Stay tuned. We will let you know. but also want to discuss something that happened this week. It was rumored to be in the works for quite a while. It wasn't exactly a huge shock when it was announced, that being President Donald Trump submitting the nomination of Andrew Wheeler to be the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency to the Senate. This is something the president had said he was looking to do in November. This week, finally, ducks were placed in a row and the nomination was officially submitted. Phil, this is a nomination that's going to have to go before Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, and a lot of foreign policy concerns are going to play a big role in his nomination and the politics surrounding it.
Yeah. Well, number one is the Waters of the U.S. rule, WOTUS rule, that the agency is in the middle of trying to rewrite. They've put out a proposed rule, but it's going to be rather extensive and going to be challenged in court. So a lot of time and attention going to that. That's probably issue number 1, 2, 3, and 4 for agriculture, but there are others as well. It was interesting that some other EPA nominations went through. One in particular is a result of a deal between Wheeler and the top Democrat on the Environment and Public Works Committee, which resulted in EPA pulling back some proposals to weaken pesticide handling regulations as they dealt with children. So they dealt with that. That probably will help Wheeler's nomination a bit as well. Going to have a hearing next week. I don't think I've ever seen a nomination going from being sent to the Senate to a hearing the following week.
Yeah, literally within 7 days.
Yeah.
So it's you can expect to hear the words climate change very frequently during that hearing, as well as the letters RFS. I imagine we'll probably make an appearance at that hearing next Wednesday at the Environment and Public Works Committee. We'll be sure to have coverage for you on that event. But before we let you go this week, I want to mention news that broke late yesterday afternoon here, taping this on a Thursday. That being that President Donald Trump will be traveling down to New Orleans next week to address members of the American Farm Bureau Federation. It's the second year in a row that he's made this trip. Went to Nashville last year. Phil and I were both in attendance for that. Also was in Indianapolis earlier this year to speak to the National FFA organization. I was in attendance for that event as well. And so this is the third ag-centric event that he's spoken to.
And you talked to the president?
I talked to the president, yes. And our boss, Sarah Wyant, had the opportunity to speak to him at the event in Nashville. And so this is the third ag-centric convention that he's addressed within the last year, and it's a bit of a rarity for a president of the United States to pay this level of attention to ag and rural issues. Obviously, it's a point that Phil made in Daybreak this morning. It really underscores the belief that the White House has that the ag and rural audience is the president's base, and they're going to make conceded efforts to speak to that group of people. And I imagine that that connection is especially as important as the shutdown continues, and perhaps some of the less supportive folks around him maybe lose their supports. The base support will be even more important.
He needs all the allies he can get.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to do it for this week. As we mentioned, the government remains shut down. We will be sure to keep you up to date on the ag ramifications of that, as well as a number of other farm policy concerns happening in Washington, D.C. and across the country. But for Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.